Chile, a country at the end of the world. It was given its name by the Incas. They called it respectfully Chile, the country in the south. A land full of contrast where nature continues to rule. Santiago de Chile, the capital of Chile, is dignified, modest, and European-looking, and also lively, modern, and full of Latin temperament. The Plaza De Armas is the heart of the city, the historic center of colonial Santiago that contains the city's most important buildings. On the northern side of the plaza is the impressive cathedral, whose huge main hall is filled with half-light. The former custom house contains the Museum of Pre-Columbian Art, with around 4,500 exhibits from Latin America. There's a constant flow of people, and the soldiers of the guard goose-step at the government palace, La Moneda. In the 18th century, it was the biggest building that the Spanish crown had built in Hispano-America. From the beginning, coins were manufactured in the palace, and it was thus named accordingly. The president resided here. Salvador Allende died during a military push, and the small chapel is a reminder of both freedom and dignity. The 70-meter-high Cerro Santa Lucia hill in the city center is where it all began. The streets are busy both day and night. And in the Mercado Municipal, people are attracted by the restaurants and buy almost anything from jewelry to fish. Large parks are scattered throughout the city and help to make it comfortable despite the heat. Brand new skyscrapers with offices and apartments seem to grow out of the ground in the Providencia district. In the Bella Vista district, famous author Pablo Neruda created an extraordinary love den. A cable car climbs the Cerro San Cristobal. A huge, shining white statue of the Virgin Mary crowns its summit. She extends her arms to protect the city that never sleeps. The city of Valparaiso, or Paradise Valley, is around 120 kilometers from the capital of Santiago de Chile, on the Pacific coast. The city's development was closely connected with its harbour, which brought it wealth and power. Since the middle of the 19th century, escalators have rattled up and down the steep hills of the harbour city. 45 hills flank the bay, and each of them is covered with a number of tiny wooden huts. In 1906, an earthquake devastated the city and 6,000 people died in the ruins. But the people persevered, rebuilt their houses, fishermen returned to work, and the trading companies set about developing new business ideas. There were once 29 escalators, but today only 15 are still in operation. But the city on the sea remains the pearl of the Pacific. The Ruta del Desierto Atacama passes through remote landscapes in the north of Chile, through small villages and rocky coasts. A journey as though to the end of the world. We begin our journey in the desert town of Calama, a place with only a recent history. The reason why the first men settled with their families in this hostile area was due to the opening of a nearby copper mine in November of 1911. Calama means yellow land, but the city also contains many green spots. Up to the beginning of the 20th century, a small number of Atacameños Indians lived here and supplied copper to the mule caravans that passed through on their way from Salta to the coast. Today, the town is located 6 kilometres from the mine. Only when the work shifts commence with cars, taxis and buses transporting the workers in or out is there any sign of life here. The rest of the time, it's peaceful. Chuquicamata is the biggest open-cast copper pit in the world, the pride of the entire country, a huge hole in the ground. On numerous terraces and at an altitude of about 3,000 meters, day and night, rock is blasted out of the ground. Each day, more than 100,000 tons of stone are blasted away. Excavators load it onto huge vehicles. The wheels of these special vehicles have a diameter of 4 meters. The large boulders are brought into halls where they're crushed and ground. Amalgamated with chemicals, it becomes a copper mud which is dried and then melted in furnaces. The last step in the working of pure copper. The journey continues to San Pedro de Atacama, a small village situated within fascinating desert landscape, a green oasis in which the heat is less savage. The main square is planted with trees and has a long history. Before the Spaniards arrived, Indians lived here. In 1744, the Iglesia de San Pedro was built in the plaza, an adobe building constructed of air-dried clay bricks and painted a shiny white. Unfortunately, today's inhabitants of San Pedro are at odds with their cultural inheritance. The houses in the center of the village now have conservation orders on them. So the old houses are sold and become souvenir shops and bars for the many day trippers who come here. "40 kilometers from San Pedro, we reach the village of Toconao. It looks desolate and hostile in the scorching midday heat. It's tired and run down. The nearby Herith Canyon is one of the few attractions of Toconao. The Honar Brook attempts to find its way through the soft, tough stone. Since time immemorial, it has watered the fertile green plants that are in stark contrast to the arid desert. A freestanding bell tower is the focal point of the village. It's shining white, 3-leveled, and with a heavy cactus wood door. Only a short journey on a gravel road and the Atacama Desert begins. At its center, it is the driest desert in the world. The forces of nature have formed an extraordinary landscape here. The Atacama extends between the Pacific Ocean and the Cordilleras. An area of stone and sand that is perforated only by various frequently dried-out salt lakes. By way of natural evaporation, the salt crust has produced sharp boulders on which the little wildlife that exists here scrambles around in search of nourishment. In these high-altitude desert regions, the changes of temperature are very extreme, often fluctuating by more than 40 degrees Celsius. A wonderful world of salt flats and rocky, arid plains. Serra de Atacama contains several water basins that become flooded with the waters of the Rio San Pedro that has a high mineral content. The largest and most accessible lagoon is that of the Lago Francoise. It's inhabited by wildlife that is able to be nourished by salt water. The crust of salt and mud of the arid high plains, plus the thin layer of salt water, has a very intense color that gives this area the appearance of a lake. We leave the desert and return to Toconao, where another natural wonder awaits us. Quebrada de Herith, a huge fissure in the desert. A canyon with high trees and surrounded by nothing but rock and sand. The Atacameños lived in the northern desert areas for several centuries and were relatively highly developed. They grew beans, corn, potatoes, and coca. They irrigated the land, bred llamas, wove cloth and baskets, decorated pottery, and traded with each other and with tribes from Peru. Our route continues further north to an archaeological sensation. The ruins of Tulor in the Los Flamencos Nature Reserve are situated amid a large salt lake, the remains of a pre-Columbian village. Remains of walls that have survived since ancient times in the desert sand, protected by constant erosion from the wind. The remains of the mud buildings highlights the important transition from a nomadic life to one of settlement, and circular huts with a diameter of up to 12 meters. Only a small part of the settlement is excavated. The remainder is still hidden beneath the desert sand. The Valle De La Luna is particularly impressive. In primeval times, it was a lake whose bed was elevated and developed due to tectonic activity. Hills and cliffs of various shapes, and in the background the huge Cordilleras with its white peaks, in sharp contrast to the blue sky. Sand dunes extend between rocky hills, fill up the hollows, and make the landscape look even more surreal. A sandy sea with islands of rock. An enchanting landscape of colored gypsum, clay, salt, and sand, and not the smallest hint of organic life, like a valley on the moon. Next, our journey takes us north, higher and higher to the Bolivian border. This is the primeval high valley of El Tatio, the highest geyser field in the world. Here it's clear that the Andes is a relatively young volcanic mountain range that is still settling down. The earth shakes and is very much alive. There are mud geysers, hundreds of fumaroles with steam fountains, and a number of geysers that shoot several meters high into the sky. Here our journey through the remote north of Chile comes to an end, through the Desierto Atacama. In Arica, we travel into the immenseness of the Altiplano, the northernmost and fifth oldest city in Chile. In the 16th century, silver treasures from Potosi were transported by mule caravan and loaded onto Spanish ships. Until 1880, Arica belonged to Peru. Old cannons on Mount Moro are a reminder of the last large Peruvian fortress. And a larger-than-life monument of Christ the Redeemer highlights the religious faith of the Chilean people. Today, the calm ambience of the harbour combines with the memory of a bygone high season, such as the Custom House at Station Square, from which in former times the legendary ferrybus embarked for Bolivia. The Iglesia San Marcos is one of the most important sites in Arica. The modest interior of the church indicates its creator, Eiffel. Only 14 years later, Eiffel became immortal due to another construction of iron some distance from here. Before we begin our journey into the highlands, we travel into the southern Pampa. Here, there's an extraordinary sight. The Gigante de Atacama, an impressive work, a giant within the desert. The biggest of the carved pictures features a king or god and was created in the 9th century by the primeval inhabitants before the arrival of the Incas or Spaniards. Back to the north. Close to Arica, we encounter further scratch images. These geoglyphs are different. They depict wildlife. To create these images, dark stones were laid onto the light-colored desert. The images also served as a type of communication. The Valle de Azapa is a valley of the Rio San Jose that is a fertile oasis. Here, the water from the river helps to sustain life. The earliest people to live here grew crops, and today the plantations contain olive trees, bananas, mangoes, passion fruit, and dates. High above the end of the valley, a road passes through the arid high plateau of the Altiplano to another valley that leads to the seas. In the highlands, the Rio Gruta formed the valley of the same name, the Valle De La Luna. Further west, inland, along ancient Inca routes, we reach Poconchili. The San Geronimo Church is one of the few buildings built of clay bricks, shining white and containing two small wooden towers, each one containing a bell. During the construction of the railway line to Bolivia, many of the workers died of malaria. In the small adjoining cemetery, the deceased found their final place of rest. Dating back to 1605, the interior of the village church is quite modest. The altar wall contains 4 niches with sacred figures. For the faithful of this region, the few religious objects here are sufficient for their needs. A humble place. Poconchili is surrounded by sparse steppe vegetation. Although life here is hard, both man and wildlife have adapted to it. An extreme living space that attracts few people. And yet there is life here. In some sections are huge and widespread Candelabra Cacti, whose long trunks are covered with pin-sharp needles. These tree-sized cacti have adapted to their arid habitat. Indeed, they're able to store water very efficiently. They obtain water by way of the damp night air. Instead of leaves, they have needles, so evaporation is much reduced. How must the soldiers of the Inca realm have felt as they traveled the long distance south from the Cusco at the command of their leader Tupac Yupanquis, always in search of new territory. Our journey continues, and the highland sun shines relentlessly. Again, we reach natural rock barriers. The Tiwanaku Indians built their first fortresses here. Pucara de Copaquilla is one of them. It was built in pre-Incan times. The realm of the Tiwanaku existed for 400 years before that of the Incas and extended over large parts of Peru, Argentina, and Chile. Their habitat was situated 3,000 meters above sea level, yet they managed to survive here. The wild vicuña is a member of the camel family. It's a very docile creature. The related llamas and alpacas became essential domesticated animals. They carry goods and produce milk and wool. The typical Andean village of Socorama lies well sheltered within a deep canyon. Blossoming cacti grow abundantly on the terrace slopes that are flanked by stone walls. Each member of the village has their own little realm. A whitewashed house constructed of clay bricks with a roof of corrugated iron. We're at an altitude of 3,000 meters and the road continues still higher. Finally, we reach Putre. The plaza is the center of the town's administration and also contains the Iglesia de Putre, that is said to have once been adorned with silver and gold, most likely a myth. Many of the buildings here date back to the 19th century. They're built of clay bricks with roofs of corrugated iron, and most of them are painted a rusty red. Most of the inhabitants are Aymara Indians. They live mainly from agriculture, animal breeding, spinning, and the sale of wool. Because they spend most of the time with their animals, the town looks desolate. We cross another high plateau of the Altiplano and reach the gateway into an ancient world. In the eastern border region with Bolivia is a natural wonder that is one of the most elevated locations on Earth. The Parque Nacional Lauca, one of the purest nature reserves in the world. Vicuña, llama, and alpaca graze in the green pastures within this demanding landscape. The wetlands provide good nourishment. Condors circle high above the wetlands, waiting to pounce, selecting their next meal. The Parinacota volcano is over 6,000 meters high and covered with snow and ice. At the foot of the mountain, bodefowl plants grow in clusters that rise out of the water. In the high green valleys, there are large herds of wild alpaca. Here there's a good supply of grass and herbs. They feel safe here. The Boreval is a vital source of nourishment for the llama and alpaca. A picturesque, idyllic green landscape crossed by small rivers. At an altitude of 4,450 meters above sea level is another ancient trading place, the picturesque Andean village of Parinacota. This ghost village is a treasure of the Altiplano. Low-built, whitewashed buildings that are connected with clay walls flank the alleys. Unfortunately, more and more old dwellings have fallen into decay due to rural depopulation. The church dates back to 1789 and is the pride of the village. A low, whitewashed mud wall surrounds the shining white bell tower, and colourful decorative elements of pink volcanic stone adorn the entrance. The Lago Chungara is the highest lake on Earth. Lying at an altitude of 4,570 meters above sea level, it's even featured in the Guinness Book of Records. Close to the Bolivian border, the peaks of the Andes Cordillera, although not massive, look most impressive, and are 6,000 meters above sea level. Although there is sufficient water here, the mixed climate makes it difficult for the vegetation. Ice-cold winds, low temperatures, and intense heat. This is the realm of the Aymara Indians. In their mythology, this wild land and its volcanoes are sacred. Abandoned mine settlements in the hot and dry pampas in the north of Chile are silent witnesses of an important era of the country's industrial history. The industrial plants were called officinas, and close to them originated small towns. Here lived the workers and their families, and all comers were free to mine saltpeter and sell it to the mine owners. The mine owners were powerful men. Everything belonged to them. The Officina Santa Lara was inaugurated in 1872 and was in use for almost 90 years. The remains of those former industrial complexes demonstrate both where and how the fortune of a few was created at the expense of those who actually carried out the work. Memorials against the exploitation of men. The Officina Humberstone was named after Englishman James Humberstone, who had a church built here. Here, faithful families from Bolivia, Chile, and Peru were able to celebrate the Sunday service in a convivial atmosphere. The town also had its own theatre, and at its high point, up to 5,000 inhabitants. A small school helped to make it look like a real town, thanks to the mine owner. From the second half of the 19th century, the saltpeter was cleansed in huge complexes and then exported. Saltpeter was used for the manufacture of gunpowder and explosive substances, later also for fertilizer. In the center of Chile is what is known as the Small South, a fascinating area of lakes. Dense vegetation requires much rainfall, but there's plenty of that here. Lakes framed by forests, and in between, land worked by man. When the rain subsides, dense clouds ascend the mountains, across forested slopes, until the first sunbeams disperse them. The small town of Petrohue is located on the western banks of the Lago Torres Los Santos and is one of the oldest settlements of the Spanish conquistador. On a sunny day, the Lagos Andinos catamaran is about to set off for its long journey along the lake to its eastern end, Piula. Those on the upper deck have a remarkable view across the deep blue lake and snow-covered volcanoes. A splendid sight. The untouched natural landscape fascinates one and all. Chile has 2,085 volcanoes. 55 of them are still active. In order to navigate the best route, the captain steers the catamaran close to the tree-lined banks. The catamaran berths. The final destination of the long journey across the lake is reached. All passengers disembark. Piula welcomes the new guests with its magnificent landscape. Indeed, this evocative area is often referred to as Chilean Switzerland. Now naturalized Chileans, German settlers once came here. Here they found a new home. The small village of Piula is situated within a romantic location on the banks of the lake. It features wooden huts whose architecture indicates its European roots. For those who want to stay for a few days and perhaps climb the Osorno volcano, there's even a hotel. Alongside the jetty, the catamaran awaits its passengers. At the beginning of the journey, each passenger must take a seat on the lower deck in order to listen to the obligatory safety instructions. The catamaran contains the latest technology, and the steering is done by a tiny joystick. The mountains are our constant companion, and in between are the peaks of the Puntiagudo, Osorno and Tronador volcanoes. Time passes quickly. Only the position of the sun indicates that the day is drawing to an end, a time when we will arrive at the western end of the lake. The village of Petrohue is on the southern bank of the lake. The Saltos de Petrohue are reached via a short walk over narrow wooden bridges. The primeval force of the water is fascinating as it plunges relentlessly into the abyss. Paths lead to the edge of the water. Melting ice from the Osorno volcano flows into the Rio Petrohue. Light blue, crystal clear mountain water flows at high speed across a field of lava. Rocks in the riverbed force the water to change direction. Foaming and roaring, it travels in various directions, but always towards the lake. A car journey leads to the Lago Francoise. On the western side, in front of the snow-covered Osorno volcano, people are bathing. Not an unusual sight in this holiday region. Puerto Valles is the main town of this holiday region. In 1854, a harbour was built in order to connect it with the trading centre of Puerto Montt. When the German settlers came into this area, almost all of the land was covered by dense forest. Lakes and rivers were used for the transport of goods and people. Today, many of those who live in the nearby surroundings spend the weekend here. The centre of Puerto Valles contains some fine colonial buildings, whose architecture is clearly of German origin. Younger travellers inspired the introduction of hippie markets, plus an alternative art scene, always interesting and colourful. The first settlement grew quickly, and those who settled here soon realized their dreams of both freedom and communal life. Puerto Montt is the capital of the Los Lagos region, a harbour town in Reloncaví Bay. Since its foundation in the middle of the 19th century, the town earns its living from its harbour, and the cruise ships that come here add to its prosperity. Also, German immigrants are duly remembered. A bronze monument features various colonials and a primeval inhabitant who is showing them the way. This area was once covered with dense forest. When in 1852 the first German settlers arrived, they cleared the forest and built both a church and a prison. Those who built a 2-story high building received a quarter block of land. So the city began to grow rapidly. Huts constructed of wood and corrugated iron continue to stand alongside modern concrete buildings. They cling to the slopes beyond the harbour like a gateway to the wild south. The city's architecture is reminiscent of that of Central Europe. About 30 minutes by car ferry from Paguera on the Chilean mainland to Chacao on the northeastern section of Isla Grande de Chiloé. The ferry is soon unloaded. In the small village of Chacao, there's a large wooden church, one of more than 150 that are scattered across the island. Everything is made of wood. Not a single nail was used, only wooden pegs. 14 of the churches have been designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites since the year 2000. The origin of these extraordinary churches is not only due to the centuries of isolation of the island from the mainland, but also because of the unique symbiosis of cultural elements of Jesuit monks, Spanish invaders, Indians, and German immigrants. Ancud was the capital of the island until 1982. In 1767, the Spanish established a fortress here, the last before the no-man's land of the south. It's difficult to believe that this fishing village was witness to a dramatic past. For those ships that sailed around Cape Horn, Ancud represented a safe harbour on the journey north, in which they could rest after sailing the stormy waters of the South Pacific. At a time when whales and seals were hunted in the Antarctic, Ancud served as a supply station along the route to the southern polar sea. All that brought a modest wealth. Dalquehue lies to the south on the inhabited eastern coast. This single-tower, white-blue church is one of the largest and most beautiful wooden churches on Chiloé. Its main facade is decorated with a portico on the tower side, and outside there are arcades that contain 9 arches. The village's name indicates that this small settlement was used as a harbour in pre-Columbian times. Hue means village, and Dalca, rowing boat. The captivating landscape hardly changes all along the eastern coast, including to the most extreme location of the fjord-type bays. Hills, lakes, and sea views. Rilan is a remote village at the end of the world. And even here, the missionaries constructed impressive churches with the help of the local inhabitants. The Jesuits introduced 2 things: the Catholic religion that combined with local mythology, and the art of church building. At first they planned to have stone buildings, but instead adapted their plans to the local environment and built wooden churches. Castro is the island's oldest town and also the capital of Chiloé province. Along the waterfront are numerous colourful wooden houses on stilts, the palafitos. At high tide, the fishermen are able to land by boat directly beneath their houses. When in 1567 the Spaniard Francisco de Aroa discovered the island, he founded Castro, its imposing cathedral having been built in 1906. The church's interior contains brownish colours, with circular wooden columns and a beautiful carved altar. It was designed by the Italian architect Edoardo Provasoli, whose original plan was to build the church out of concrete. However, wood was used instead. Also, the figures of saints are carved from the wood of the alerce tree. The town of Conchi is situated in the south of the island. The landmark and main tourist site is also here, a wooden church. The interior is of a light, natural wood, and there's a pulpit with a spiral staircase. None of the island's other churches has a pulpit. The dark blue barrel vaults of the main naves form a canopy, supported by wooden posts with carved capitals. When the Jesuits were banned from America in 1767, the Franciscan order took over their work, and many of the churches date back to this period. The local artists had a distinct artistic style that they gradually perfected as their own. The small village of Vilupuli is dominated by the Iglesia San Antonio de Padua, whose 3-section tower is almost 19 meters high. 6 simple columns support the facade. The left side altar is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and the one on the right to Jesus, flanked by holy friars. The deep faith of the island's inhabitants indicates that the myths of old also survived, and combined with local Catholicism. And the church architecture has been adapted to both the landscape and local belief. The main landmark of Nercon is a freestanding wooden church within an elevated location. It features the typical architecture of the island, but with some variations. The once white colour of the facade has turned grey, and the side walls are of typical island design elements and supported by several inclined wooden posts. At the side of the old wooden church is the village cemetery. Here lie the ancestors of those who first made the island habitable. They had no defence against the diseases that were brought here by the Spanish. And in the 17th century, Dutch pirates invaded the island, causing much mayhem. From the Bahia Punihul, boats travel around the Islotes de Punihul, islands that lay off the main island and are inhabited by some interesting wildlife. The arriving guests change places with the newcomers, and a new tour of the islands is about to begin. After a short time, the first of 3 small islands comes into view. It's crowded with its wildlife inhabitants. Lots of photos are taken. These islands are the only known resting place of both Humboldt and Magellan penguins, and are also inhabited by the red-legged cormorant and the kelp gull. The short distance from island to island is quite adventurous because the sea here is extremely rough. Powerful waves and foaming surf seem to protect the islands, and the upright penguins look like guards from another world. The drive to the small islands is a real adventure for one and all, a special event. In the south of Chile is one of the most fascinating mountain regions on Earth, the Torres del Paine National Park in Patagonia. During the last ice age, a thick layer of ice covered the whole region. The ideal habitat for the indigenous wildlife, a world that has maintained its originality. Wind, water, ice and rock, each has formed this landscape over millions of years and created scenery that is totally unique. With impressive mountain scenery as its background, the Salto Grande plunges down with a thunderous roar in several cascades into Lake Pejoy below. Old weather-beaten trees, an extraordinary stone wall, and birds that are threatened by extinction, plus herds of guanacos inhabit this special habitat. Here the natural world of Patagonia is, despite slight encroachment by man, as pure and untouched as it was thousands of years ago. In the southernmost south of the South American continent, a scenic and almost paradise-like area of wilderness has managed to survive. Truly one of the most wonderful mountain regions on Earth. Around 3,500 kilometers west of the mainland, something appears from the endless horizons of the Pacific. Rapa Nui, otherwise known as Easter Island. 3 million years ago, volcanic activity created a small island of lava here. The island's main focal point is its gigantic and mysterious stone monuments that date back to late prehistoric times. Nearly all the mighty figures, known as moai, originated from the slopes of the Rano Raraku volcano. In tough stone, it was an ideal sculpting material. Rock paintings known as petroglyphs indicate that a great transformation took place within this island society, and in the 16th century, the bird people cult began to develop. But the exact meaning of these intriguing giant megalithic sculptures will most likely remain an unsolved mystery for the rest of time. From the Atacama Desert in the north to as far as stormy Tierra del Fuego in the south, Chile is a country rich in contrast. Volcanoes, arid deserts, salt lakes, lively geysers, and sandstone mountains, and also a cosmopolitan city. All of this is to be found in Chile, a country at the end of the world.